In the past few years, we've heard the term free agents and been told we would all need to become one in order to succeed. The recent economic structures have helped to promote this concept as reality. Where do we get the tools to take control of our career path in the present and future? Welcome to the Career Confidante with your host, Marie Zimenoff. Marie and her guest experts are here to provide you with the tools you need to move forward and achieve your career goals. Now, here is Marie Zimenoff.
Hello and welcome to the Career Confidante, and we're glad you're joining us today. And we are going to be talking about a topic that has been hot for a while, still hot but evolving. How do we use AI in our job search and resume, all the things we might want to use it for as we're looking for a new career? So we've been talking about this topic for a couple of years, right? In November 2022, ChatGPT came out, but we were actually talking about this topic before then because AI has been used, especially in recruiting, for many years before ChatGPT came out, and even in the career space, and many of the normal assessments that we use in the career space, we're using machine learning and some of the big data topics that are related to or sometimes included in the definition of artificial intelligence. So this wasn't a new thing. In fact, a lot of times when I talk about this topic, we look at some of the career chatbots that came into existence from 2018 to 2020, some out of Australia, some out of the UK, Belgium, and this was a thing in the field even before ChatGPT. But of course, ChatGPT, most of what it did was give technology that had been used by big companies that cost, a lot of money, now made it accessible to you and me and all the career services providers and all the job seekers and even more recruiters that maybe didn't have access to those recruiting platforms because they tend to be cost prohibitive, or at least they used to be. So when we think about how our work has changed in the career space, but when we think about it, it's not just our work, of course, it's every single job and at every level in most industries are now trying to figure out how can they use this technology to do their work better, faster, better outputs, all of those things. And really that's what we want to look for is where are the opportunities to use these tools to do things better, not get caught up in just using it for the sake of using it, and definitely being aware of the opportunities that it has to undercut our success. And we'll kind of talk about those as we go through. We're not going to just talk about generative AI tools like ChatGPT and Perplexity and some of the other Claude, those types. We are also going to talk about some tools that are specific to job search that are being developed or have been developed. And again, some of them have been around for a while, but they did not use some of the same technology before that they have access to now, which is great because it means that you, as a job seeker or as a career services provider, now have access to more opportunity, right? How do we do things better, faster, stronger using some of these tools? So we're going to start by doing a little bit of an overview, and then we're going to dive into some of the tools that you can use and what to watch out for when you use them from our perspective. So Career Thought Leaders has been teaching tools and for years, as I said, before ChatGPT, and we see how they've helped job seekers. We get to hear from hundreds of career services practitioners who are using these technologies with job seekers and how they work or don't work. If you have opportunity and would love to share, feel free to send me an email, marie@careerthoughtleaders.com. And we'd love to hear your experience with using these tools. We're always looking for speakers for some of our events and things. So if you've got something to share, please let me know. All right. So in general, when people talk about generative AI, they're talking about these tools that generate text. And these are still pretty much prediction tools. So as you write, they're using their billions of data points to predict what the next word would be in the sentence. And then, of course, they're generating sentences, paragraphs, articles, books based on that prediction that comes from the analysis of all of those data points. So it's like if you read 1 billion books, you would be able to predict what the sentence would be based on a question or a topic or whatever, because you've read so many books. And there's not too much unique out there, right? I think they say there's only 6 stories in the world, and the same story gets told differently with a few different characters, and now it's a whole different book. And that, in essence, that's what these generative AI tools are doing. So if you're asking it to write a sales resume, it's looking at all of the resumes it's ever read, and we'll talk about where it's reading those here in a second. It's reading all of those, and then it's saying, okay, based on all of this data that I've read, here's what is most likely, not best, but most likely to be the answer to your question or the best bullet points for your resume based on what it's read. So the generative AI tools, they're just one AI tool, of course. We have other tools in the toolbox, big data, machine learning that makes things faster. And a lot of the times the tools pair different aspects of artificial intelligence together to make the system that it's using, right? So part of ChatGPT being able to learn what you like and keep your instructions and all of that, part of that is included in the system, generative AI, as well as the machine learning piece. We're going to talk about some other tools that don't use generative AI necessarily yet, but how they can help you in your job search. And that's kind of the fun, right? Is that a lot of these new tools got new life, got new money because ChatGPT came out and was so popular. So when we think about how you use these tools in your job search, the first thing to understand is where the information comes from. And all the models are a little bit different, but ChatGPT, because it's open source, has published where its data comes from, and it can be helpful in just giving you an idea of where you're getting your information from if you ask this model a question. So about 60% of the data comes from a common web crawl. So 60% is looking at all of the articles out on the internet, anything that's publicly available out on the internet. What does that say about the question that you're asking? And this is often where a career services person would give you a little bit of caution, because just something that's out on the internet doesn't mean that it is accurate. So the other day I was doing some goofing around brainstorming for a conversation I was having around executive resumes with a colleague, and the ChatGPT output said that we needed to be worried about applicant tracking systems. Well, that's just common talk, but it's not good knowledge, because most of the time at the executive level, we're talking C-suite, those tools are not being used the same way or at all as they are used for other levels of candidates. And in general, the internet talks about applicant tracking systems in a way that they're not very commonly used. So it talks about how the system is used to eliminate people, and you've got to score well, and you've got to have an ATS optimized resume. And pretty much any recruiter will tell you that all of that is bogus. Applicant tracking systems, for the most part, are a filing system. They're sorting. They might be scoring, but they're very rarely eliminating. And most of the time, a human is looking at it. And at the executive level, you can bet that the human is looking at every applicant who answers the questions that they might put in, those screening questions. So when you think about what you're getting from ChatGPT, it is still in some ways like doing a Google search, and there's going to be stuff that isn't correct. And just because something is repeated over and over again on the internet doesn't mean it's true or best practice. And that's one of the things we have to be aware of. Another piece so that's 60%. The other piece is books, and these might be books that were publicly available or the copyright had expired, so they were accessible. And if it is a copyrighted book, that for the most part would not have been accessible by these tools. Now the data pool has tiny bit shrunk, as you've seen some websites allow people to opt out of letting the system train with their data. I always kind of giggle when we talk about LinkedIn, because LinkedIn does have a feature now where you can go in and say that you don't want AI to train on your data, but that ship has already sailed. That was like a year after ChatGPT came out and was already using publicly available web data, which would include your LinkedIn profile or any part of it that was public. And so, yes, you can say no, but it still happened. And that's important for us to know. Then we want to talk a little bit about ethics and what do we want to be careful of when we're using these tools. Of course, thinking about privacy and any information that you put in, knowing that that is going to go into a big data pool. Now, the myth that I often hear here is that people think, oh, if I put my resume in, someone else is going to be able to copy it. And that's not true. Your data for your resume is like a drop in the ocean, or that might even be an understatement, right? You've got 2,000 words going into billions of data points, and now it's going to perhaps be helped to train that model if you're allowing the system to do that, but it's never going to be spit out even in any recognizable format related to what you put it in as. So that's important to know. Yes, you don't want to put your contact information in there. You don't even have to put in company specific information if you don't feel comfortable doing it. But the use of the system to your benefit is probably worth the little bit of risk of having that information be pulled out in some way. So when we think about that piece, that's important. Bias is another piece of it, that the systems are programmed mainly by white men. And so thinking about what that means, but they're also programmed based on data that is, like I said, out there on the internet. So that's going to have the same biases as any kind of person. So if I'm thinking about how do I want to ask a question, or how can I ask a question in a way that won't bring up bias, as a career services provider, I'm always thinking about that. So if I'm thinking about helping a client with a certain major, for instance, I'm going to be thoughtful about the way I put that in there, because if I put it in with the major, I might introduce a bias. For instance, if I say I'm working with a nursing major, everyone in kind of general population would assume that that's a female. We don't like that assumption, but that's what comes up in our brain. And it's important to recognize that, because otherwise I might not recognize that I'm dealing with that bias. So I just changed the way that I put that in and hopefully prevent getting that bias out. Okay, so that's some general stuff. When we come back, we're going to talk specifically about how you can use it in your career exploration and resume, job search, interviewing, with very specific tactics that you can use today, whether you're a career services provider or a job seeker yourself. We'll be right back in just a few minutes.
Follow Voice America at facebook.com/Voice America for juicy updates from your favorite radio shows and podcasts.
You know that the career landscape has changed and that you need to be proactive about managing your career. You can have the foresight, skills, and confidence you need to take charge of your career and seize opportunities. A strategic advantage and career expert, Marie Zimenoff has helped thousands of leaders like you get focused, get found, and get hired. Visit getcareersmart.com to find out more. That's getcareersmart.com, or call 800-521-2080 to schedule your complimentary consultation.
Voice America programs are now available on your favorite connected device, including Amazon, Alexa, and Google Home. Through streams with Apple Podcasts, TuneIn, and iHeartRadio, listening to your favorite show is as easy as saying the show name followed by the word podcast.
Hey, Alexa, play Finding Your Frequency podcast.
If that doesn't work, try adding on TuneIn or on iHeartRadio or on Apple Podcasts.
When it comes to business, you'll find the experts here. Voice America Business Network.
You are tuned in to the Career Confidante with Marie Zimenoff. If you have a question or comment for Marie or her guest today, please send an email to marie@strategicadvantage.com. Now, back to the Career Confidant.
Welcome back to the Career Confidant, and today we're talking about how you can use artificial intelligence tools in your career search, job search, and everything in between. So the first thing, again, to recognize is that AI has been in some ways used in many of our career assessments from day one. And machine learning, AI is not new. Maybe this is something to talk about briefly here. So AI came out in the 50s, 60s. It's kind of interesting when you look at the history of it because there wasn't a clear business case. So it was used obviously in military and some of those uses, but because the computing power didn't exist to really harness the business value of AI, that it kind of had a winter is what they call it, an AI winter. And then it came back in the mid-90s. You had Watson, and you may remember this, I don't, I was a little too young, but winning Jeopardy when AI kind of started to come back in the mid-90s. And then, of course, under the radar, but still being used in a lot of recruiting applications where they were using it to go out and source and filter and score. It's been used in recruiting functions for quite a while, and in many other business applications, but as far as our purview goes here. So what happens then is in November of 22, obviously the whole ideas behind ChatGPT were available and being used by many other different applications, with a lot more money. And then in November 22 was released to the public. But we have to realize that that technology was around and being used in other things for many years before that, as it was perfected towards what it was when it was released as OpenAI. So when we think about how we might use it in the career exploration piece, there are a bunch of newer tools that have come out in the assessment side of things. And now a bunch of the older assessments that we've always used now use generative AI to help people kind of interpret the assessment. So it's interesting to see that they're adding this kind of chat feature where you can take an assessment and then chat with your results. And so you get this assessment, it says these are the careers or things that you're aiming towards, and then you can chat with it. There's also been some interesting ones released to the public and that kind of combine all of the assessments. And I've experimented with a few of them. They're not hard to find, but you can just go on and experiment and see what other career assessments are out there. And if you put AI in, you'll get kind of the newer ones. But these assessments that kind of combine the interests, strengths, types of assessments we've been doing for a while, and then give people suggestions. Now, there's always a challenge here because no assessment can capture the complexity of a human's experience and the human's personality, right? All the different facets. And so when we do any type of assessment, AI assisted or not, we've got to understand that we're getting a starting point. We're not getting an answer. And this is one of the most frustrating things I see going around on the popular internet about using ChatGPT is, put in your resume and ask it what your ideal job is. But there's a reason that when we do career assessments, they give you many opportunities, many options that align with the factors that come out in the assessment, because it's not a good idea to just get one idea, right? Like we don't just want to give you one idea of a career. So don't ask AI to give you your ideal career. That's silly. Also, be careful because you're putting your resume in, but what does your resume include? Does it include everything? Is it actually a good representation of what you've done? And even if it is that, is it a good reputation of what you want to do? Because if you're trying to get out of what you want to do, putting your resume in and asking for things that line up to your resume probably isn't the best idea because you're just going to get more of the same. So knowing what you want, that's different. would be good. So you could say, here's my resume. Here are some of the interests I have or skills I want to use. And then how could I use these same skills in a new job based on my resume? That would be a much better question. And so when we think about prompts and this whole day, especially when you're doing generative AI, people talk about the prompts. But a prompt, you can't like formulate it like you could if you're going to get content. So a lot of the times when I see people talking about, get a good prompt and you'll get better outcomes, they're talking about things that can be made into a formula. Like I'm going to use the place, product, price formula for my marketing, right? And I can put that in and I can get better output out. That's great. But when you're talking about careers, the quote unquote formulas are really aligned with career development practices and best practice. So like I just said, we don't want to give a prompt that says, here's my resume, tell me my ideal career. It doesn't matter if you follow the best prompt packaging in the world, you're still going to get a bad answer because you're asking a bad question developmentally for the purpose you're wanting it for. So the prompt outline that I like the best is context. Let me see if I can grab here, make sure I don't say it wrong. Okay, context, what are you trying to do? The data you want the system to access. Action, so being clear about what you want. Results, specifying what you want the output to look like, and then examples. What examples do you want are there examples you can provide? So that's a good thought process. But if you're doing it in the context of career, especially career exploration, you have to think about what makes sense. And it makes sense to have the system brainstorm for you. It makes sense to give it good info, right? You've got to give good input, but that goes beyond just a prompt. It goes to really knowing yourself or your client if you're working with a client. This is why what I typically do is take the outputs of the career exploration processes that we'd normally go through with a client and then get ChatGPT to be a partner in the process. So if I'm going to ask for help brainstorming careers, well, we know that we want to have their interests, we want to have their skills, we want to have the things they value or what they're looking for out of work. And we can put all of those things into ChatGPT with some experience. This is what they've done before. It doesn't have to be their resume. And we can get better output because we're putting in all of that information. That is the benefit of the process, is that we've got to have the internal data first, knowing what the person actually wants, knowing what they're interested in, know the skills they like to use, and then we can have the system help us brainstorm new careers. And it's really fun. It's a great coaching tool. If you are a job seeker, I'd be a little bit careful with this one because it can get overwhelming really quickly. The whole beauty of the exercise is to do it sort of in an iterative process. So here are the skills I want to use, and what are some options for me. Then based on that, I've got this experience. What else would you add, or what other ideas? You start broad and then you start narrowing it down. And then you look at those ideas and you think, okay, what is interesting about those? What's not interesting? What's missing? What don't I want to do? What would I eliminate? And you can go through an iterative prompt process to have a conversation with the chat tool and get some ideas. Now, it's not a perfect process and it's not a repeatable process in some ways, which is frustrating. I could ask the exact same prompts 2 days in a row and get different answers because you're almost never going to get the exact same answer twice because of the way the technology works. And that can be fun. It can give you more ideas. It can also be frustrating because you're going to get a lot of ideas. This is where coaches help their clients walk through the information, talk through, prioritize, figure out what they want to do next. What do they want to act on? Because that's what they're going to move forward. So when we get those ideas, we start to, go do the human part of doing the research, figuring out what is actually going to be a good fit for us, and then we can make those decisions. So when we get to here's what I want to do, how can it help me write a resume around this? And we've had a lot of fun with these types of questions. If you check out our YouTube channel, so Career Thought Leaders YouTube channel, we've got some videos where we walk through using these systems to analyze a job description. You're putting the actual job description in and analyzing it. Still not a perfect process, but it's pretty good. I'd say it rivals the paid tools out there. If you go in and you ask it to analyze the job description, and I always ask it for the nouns, the verbs, the keywords that they'd be looking for, what adjectives might I use to describe myself, and you can ask it very specific questions to understand what the job description is really asking for. Then you can compare that to your existing resume. Now, caveat again here, if your resume doesn't have great content on it, if it doesn't have a lot of your stories of what you've done on it, that's not going to work. The other thing I do is ask, what questions should I ask based on this existing resume to uncover information that might not be included on the resume right now? And it does a great job of this. So it gives you questions to ask yourself, or if you're a resume writer working with a client, it gives you questions to ask them to uncover that content that might not be in their resume already that could be related to the job. Now, here's the thing that an AI cannot do is figure out how to draw the strategic connections between what you've done and what you want to do. So if you had, maybe the best prompts from a branding expert, or you go in and try the GPTs, but the problem with that is if you don't know the answers to the questions, it can't ask the follow-up questions like a human can. It's really those strategic connections get missed. And that branding piece of what about your background is really going to add value to the human hiring on the other end, that's where the differentiation happens. It's where the richness happens, going beyond the keyword matching. That the system can help you do keyword matching, but that's just at the surface level. And it's still not compelling if you can't figure out what stories from your background demonstrate the skill sets that they're asking for. And this is where digging in and really being able to tell your own stories is critical. And we'll talk about the data of why this is so important here in just a few minutes. We're going to take a break. So I will tell you that Career Thought Leaders has some training on using AI in career services. We're going to be releasing micro-credentials in the new year. So if you are a job seeker looking for a career practitioner who is well-versed in using these tools to help you with your job search, we'll have a new directory for you to go access. And if you are a career practitioner wanting to learn how to use these, drop us a note, marie@careerthoughtleaders.com, or watch our site and our social media as we announce our micro-credentials launching this week as we lead into the new year. We're going to take a short break, and when we come back, we're going to talk about some data that shows why getting your own stories into your resume is so critical and how you can do that while using these AI tools. We'll be right back in just a few minutes.
Voice America is on LinkedIn. Connect with us today.
You know that the career landscape has changed and that you need to be proactive about managing your career. You can have the foresight, skills, and confidence you need to take charge of your career and seize opportunities. A strategic advantage and career expert, Marie Zimenoff has helped thousands of leaders like you get focused, get found, and get hired. Visit getcareersmart.com to find out more. That's getcareersmart.com, or call 800-521-2080 to schedule your complimentary consultation.
Have you become a member yet? Sign up now to become a member of Voice America. It's always free and easy. Plus, you get to take advantage of some great member benefits. Get unlimited access to millions of hours of on-demand content across all of our channels. Keep track of your favorite episodes, shows, and hosts in your own customizable library. Find out what shows you might be interested in based on your favorites. Plus, you get insider access with our newsletter. Membership gives you more. Sign up at voiceamerica.com and click register at the top right.
When it comes to business, you'll find the experts here. Voice America Business Network.
You are tuned in to the Career Confidante with Marie Zimenoff. If you have a question or comment for Marie or her guest today, please send an email to marie@strategicadvantage.com. Now, back to the Career Confidante.
Welcome back to the Career Confidante, and today we've been talking about using AI in your process for job search, career exploration, etc. So when we think about using AI in our resume writing, a lot of times people just go in and they say, write my sales resume, or here's my old resume, make it better. And nobody really knows what that means. So we've been talking about using it to analyze a job description. What are the most important qualifications from this? What is the employer really looking for? You can do some really cool things and ask about the pains of the industry, what's going on right now, what is that hiring manager really looking for in a candidate? And again, it's going to look at the big data of what's going on in those industries, and it gives some really good on-point insights. Then what questions might I answer to get better content on my resume? Here's my existing content. What else might I ask myself to get better content? This is where we can't shortcut the process. We have to tell your stories, because that's what the employer is looking for. How can they see if you're qualified if you're not sharing any of your own stories? And this is the number one reason that in recent polls, we've seen 60-70% of HR people say that a red flag, one of the main red flags in a resume for them, is being able to tell that it was AI generated. It's not that they don't want you to use the tools, but they're nervous that if you've used the tools to a certain extent, the content on your resume might not be true, accurate, be the stories that you've actually done. Or just on the other end, it's so generic and obvious that it was not written about you. And the same thing used to happen when we were writing using books or templates. And those caused the same problems, just not at this massive scale, because we didn't have we didn't have so many people doing it. But when I see that there's the same sentences over and over again, or I can tell that this sounds more like a job description than a resume, I'm going to be leery of that, not because you used AI necessarily, but because I don't know if this was something you actually did, or if it's just something that found its way onto your resume because it was copied out of whatever, AI, a book, a template, a job description. So people will say, well, they're using AI, why can't I? And it's like, well, you can use it. You just can't make it so incredibly obvious that I question if this is something that you actually did. All right. So we do the research, we figure out what are people really looking for, we figure out what stories do we really want to tell. Then tell your stories, write them out, speak them. This is a place where AI can help you after you've got the basics of the story, or maybe you've written out a long story and you have it help you work it into a bullet. Those are good ways to use AI. You just have to be really careful, because remember, it's pulling from thousands, billions of data points, and it has a specific way that it is going to write every time, pretty much no matter what prompt you give it. So I've got writers that say, I've got my prompts perfected and it writes really well. And I say, yeah, that's fine, but you're not going to be able to override the billions of data points it's using with just prompts. So you've got to think about that in terms of what do you want to do to make sure that you're catching it, that you're editing it, and not just editing. I feel like that word doesn't do it justice. It's really about combing through each statement, making sure it sounds like you, that it's accurate, that the words used in it are the right ones, because it's not, it's going to write in its formulaic way, and we've got to make sure that we translate it really diving in and making sure that it's accurate and that it does say what we've done, and that we would be comfortable speaking to that in the interview, but that also when we speak to it in the interview, it would sound like us, because that's going to make the interview question what you've written. If you tell the story in an interview and it sounds way different than what you've got written on the resume. So it's fine to use AI as a wordsmith or even have it turn this story into a bullet, but then you want to examine it. Does it capture the most important points of the story based on what you know about the hiring manager? And does it sound authentically like you? Then we can grade the resume too. So this is kind of fun. You can put in your resume and the job description, and very similar to that step where we were doing the research, now we could say, okay, how much of this job does my resume hit? Are there any gaps? Sometimes it, points out gaps that aren't there because its purpose is to answer your question. So if you say, point out the gaps, it will point out the gaps, even if they aren't really there or they're kind of minimal. We just have to take it with a grain of salt when we ask for that and we get that information back. But I love to use it for these things. And if you are writing your resume, or if you're a resume writer, I would encourage you to experiment with at least the front end and or the back end piece of the research. What's the employer really looking for? And even what questions could I ask based on this old resume and this new information about what I'm targeting now? Those are powerful steps, and they're not going to replace our human analysis, our expert analysis, but they do add value and they can speed it up. And then on the back end, once I have that resume complete, I can do, hey, match it up to this job description. Where are the gaps? Where do I need to fill it in? I do not recommend asking AI to target the resume for you, because when it does that, it oftentimes adds in generic junk, what I call generic junk. It oftentimes adds in that generic junk to make it quote unquote align, and it will take out your specific accomplishments in its process of doing that. And you can prompt it not to do that, but you still have to be aware of its tendency to do that. So then we get into job search, and the same research that we just did on the job description and what's the employer looking for, what are their pain points, that is going to be incredibly important information for a job search or for interview preparation. And if I've got a specific company or even an industry, I can figure out what's going on, what are the pain points, what's an employer looking for, what is this industry dealing with right now. There's just a lot of very insightful information I can get from these big data systems as an individual. And what we have to realize is that, Deloitte, McKinsey, they were using tools like this for, I don't know, maybe a decade, where they were accessing these big data pools and gathering market insights for companies and charging millions of dollars for them. And now you and I have access to that same information, which is amazing. With just a few questions, we can get that same information. And when we do that, it's all about then how do we use it? How do we target it? And of course, we want to verify it. But I've used it for, like, on the job search side, we can find networking events, professional associations. You can get market information about a market, get information about companies, and you can get information about hiring managers kind of as a general thing, get information about individuals specifically with some of the research tools. So on the tools side in job search, I'm not a huge fan of any of the resume ones. I'll just say that right now. I know they're out there. I know you can use these AI tools to help you with your resume. I find that most of them are programmed to be worse than ChatGPT. So they're supposed to be better, but they're not, because they've got extra layers and they just make it more challenging. I would recommend, if you're writing anything, that you just go to Claude or ChatGPT for writing. I don't like LinkedIn's writing tools for writing profiles or writing resumes. They're overly formulaic. I don't know why LinkedIn's model seems way worse than OpenAI when they're both owned by Microsoft, but it just doesn't write as well. I'm not, like I said, not a huge fan of anything, and most of them are freemium, where you might get a little bit of free, but then you have to pay. And I would rather that you just use the free version of ChatGPT or Claude and not worry about paying these tools. A lot of the other tools also say they'll format your resume, but the formatting is always at the best subpar, at the worst damaging, because it creates a template that doesn't fit for your information, doesn't work for you. Remember, we're not going to talk about ATS compliance because that's not really a thing. So maybe the formats aren't the best to parse into a system, but that it's not my main complaint. It's just that they're not strategically helping you to use that template. So on the job search side, there's some very interesting things related to researching people, understanding people's backgrounds. So there are systems, we've been checking out a system called Crystal Knows, and Crystal Knows will do a DISC profile for someone using their LinkedIn profile. It's not dependent on the content in their profile, right? There's big data. We're not just looking at this little blip on the screen that is the person's profile. We're looking at all the big data behind the themes in where they've held, everything, and it creates what are pretty accurate readings on someone based on their DISC profile. There's tools recruiters are using, ones like Humantic, which is very similar to Crystal Knows, as well as ones that we can access, but you have to be careful because a lot of them could open you up for issues with LinkedIn's user agreement. Just have to watch how it's used. If it's used in any kind of profile scraping of information, that can get you into trouble. So if it's going to download their email and put their email in your CRM, that's a trouble one. Things like Human Linker is one of them, where it will also give you profiles of people based on their profile. It'll give you, I think that one does DISC as well, but you get some information on people based on their LinkedIn profile. My favorite job search tool is Perplexity, because it will do research for you, with you, and it is also free. So we're going to take a short break. When we come back, I'll tell you a few other ways that I use Perplexity in job search and interview preparation. And then we will tie this up with a little bow so that you can think about how you want to use AI as a co-pilot in your job search. We'll be right back in just a few minutes.
Voice America is on your favorite smart speaker. If you have Alexa or Google Home, go ahead and give us a try.
Hey Alexa, play Finding Your Frequency podcast on TuneIn.
You know that the career landscape has changed and that you need to be proactive about managing your career. You can have the foresight, skills, and confidence you need to take charge of your career and seize opportunities. A strategic advantage and career expert, Marie Zimenoff has helped thousands of leaders like you get focused, get found, and get hired. Visit getcareersmart.com to find out more. That's getcareersmart.com, or call 800-521-2080 to schedule your complimentary consultation.
A little birdie told me Voice America is on X. Follow us at Voice America TRN.
Are you a business owner, 1099 contractor, part-time employee, or volunteer who needs group health coverage you can actually afford? Do you know a nonprofit who would benefit from unlimited zero-cost funding? How about cost reduction, school safety, mental health wellness, and more? All these and more are fair game on Finding Certainty. If you want more certainty in your own life, you are not alone. Join us on the Voice America Business Channel. Find your own brand of certainty and realize your personal American dream with Finding Certainty, hosted by Patrick Lang. Let's unwrap the certainty experience together.
Voice America Business Network, the bottom line in business.
You are tuned in to the Career Confidante with Marie Zimenoff. If you have a question or comment for Marie or her guest today, please send an email to marie@strategicadvantage.com. Now, back to the Career Confidante.
Welcome back to the Career Confidante, and today we've been talking about using AI as your co-pilot in the job search, and just remembering that we call it a co-pilot for a reason. You are still in charge. You are still in behind the steering wheel and running the show. I like to think of AI actually as your virtual assistant team, because I hardly ever just use one tool. I usually have at least two tools open, and am pasting the questions I'm asking into both systems to see what kinds of answers I get. Or sometimes I'll use ChatGPT to a certain point and then switch over to Perplexity. So Perplexity.ai is a research tool. It's built on a little bit different data set, but mostly it also has different parameters to where if it doesn't know the answer to a question, it won't make it up like ChatGPT can. It will tell you, I don't know, or I don't have enough information. Sometimes, in fact, it frustrates me because it will tell me it doesn't have that information when it seems like really it should be able to get it. And sometimes I will say, go to this site, go to that site, see what you can find. And when I ask it again, it will indeed gather what I'm looking for. And that's where that context piece of the good prompt comes from. So remember, we were talking about a good prompt has the context in addition to the specific places I want it to get the information from. So when I talk about context in a prompt, I'm not talking about saying, you are a resume writer. I don't often use roles. I know that is another prompt format. It's not my favorite because that doesn't tell it anything. Saying you are a resume writer. Well, guess what? It thinks a resume writer is not the writer I think a resume writer is, because it's using 60% of a general web crawl to determine what it thinks a resume writer is. So I will ask it more specifically what I'm looking for. If I want to say you're a labor market analyst, that might be fine, but I really want to tell it where I want it to get the information. Check out the Bureau of Labor Statistics and any other articles that list labor market research. That's what I'm looking for, right? So I'm going to be specific with what I'm looking for, not just say you are a labor market analyst. That may or may not really get to what I'm looking for. So when I do that, then I can move into using Perplexity to do some research. So I might do some of my early prompts in ChatGPT about analyze this job description and those types of things. And then I'll copy them over to Perplexity, but I won't get as good of output there. It just isn't as verbose. And what I want to do there, though, is then move into what types of companies are hiring for these kinds of roles. I'm going to do my check and make sure. All right, give me the research on those companies. And this is where you can, the more informed you are as a coach and a candidate, the better output you'll get. Although you could ask it, what should I be researching about these companies? And it will tell you. And then you can ask it, and this is my favorite. We did this on my live stream on Friday, to create a table of those companies with that information. So let's say you want revenue, number of employees, top products and services, whatever else you might want to know about a company. You just ask it to put those target companies into a table with that information. And in like a minute, maybe less, 30 seconds, you've got a table of your target companies with the information you want to know about them. And then you can continue building on that, adding to it as you do your research and uncover other things you want to know about those companies. So it's a fabulous way to build your research really quickly. Now remember, that's just the beginning. Now we have to go and do the networking. Where are we going to network? What types of questions might I ask these types of people? What events might I go to? It can help you do that research too. And then you actually have to go out and do it. This is where most of the coaching comes in. Sure, the technology can do all of that piece with you and your coach or by yourself if you want to. But then it's got to be, how are you going to get out there and actually do it? What's preventing you? What's the schedule? What's the plan? How are you going to get it done? If you can do all that by yourself, great. But that's really where a coach comes in helping us overcome our own kind of internal barriers to these types of activities that are not pleasant for most people. And even if people like to network, they typically don't like to do it for this purpose, where we're not just going, just going out, nice to meet you. And that's the start of it. But we have to be able to carry it through to getting where we want to go in our conversation and in the follow-up, so that we're building our network towards the jobs that we're targeting. And that's the piece that you're going to have to do, whether you do it on your own or you do it with a coach. It can help you with the research, even the strategy. It can lay it out for you. It can tell you what to say, where to go, and give you scripts. It can do all of that. But at the end of the day, you're going to have to go out there and start doing the work for your job search and interviewing. Same thing. You can research the company. You can ask for the questions, but then you have to go out there and do the work. Now, there are a few AI tools that claim they will do the work for you. And there's even some popular articles saying that they're so great. Tools like Lazy Apply, and where they'll apply to jobs for you. And they're fine to try. What our career services people have told me is that they aren't great in terms of their execution, which is frustrating. That you set up a job and they apply to things you didn't want it to, sometimes don't even apply to the things you do want it to. Some of those systems have a less automated option where you can review. So it'll give you a notification. Hey, this job came up, and you can review it. You can target your resume and then send it off. And that might be a better option for most people than trying to go fully automated. And give those tools a try if you think it's interesting, and see how you think it might work for you. The other piece of it, and there's a ton of AI preparation tools, Higher Logic, and Udly, which is kind of a speak coach and an interviewing coach. But there's a lot of them out there that will give you feedback on how your presentation is, and some of them will even give you feedback on your content. And there's some free ones like Google's AI or Google's interview prep tool, and LinkedIn has one. But again, I've never been able even to get it work, so I can't tell you how good it is. There's tools out there that will give you feedback on your answers. You can also achieve the same thing in ChatGPT by recording yourself and then putting in your answer transcript. Say, here's the question, here's my answer, and give me an analysis, right? What, from an employer's point of view, what did I do well? What didn't I do well? What should I add? What should I take out? And you can do that using any of those tools that will let you put in a large text entry like ChatGPT or Claude. I'd recommend copying and pasting instead of uploading, just because our team has noticed that the uploads don't seem to be read as well as when you just copy and paste things in. Now there's one brand new tool called Final Round that will be a really more active Copilot that you can have it up while you're interviewing. And when the interviewer asks the question, it will automatically start generating a response. This I would use with extreme caution. Everybody can see that you're reading. If you're not practiced with your answers, it's just not going to go well. So just because a tool exists doesn't mean that you want to use it or that you want to use it in that way. We're always thinking about, how does this fit within the career development process, in job search, in career exploration? Does this make sense? Should I ask a system to give me my ideal job? Probably not, right? Should I ask a system to give me the interview answer to this question while I'm live with the interviewer? Probably not. So use these tools wisely. Use them in a way that makes sense from both your point of view as well as the employer's point of view, because being adversarial gets us nowhere. And if you want more on this topic, we are doing a every other Friday, first and third Fridays live stream called Friday in Career Services on the Career Thought Leaders YouTube channel. And reach out to me. Let me know what you'd like to hear about. Marie, Marie, at careerthoughtleaders.com. And we'll see you right back here on the Career Confidant.
Thank you for listening to the Career Confidant. Marie Zimenoff will return again with another terrific guest next Monday at 2 p.m. Eastern Time, 11 a.m. Pacific on the Voice America Business Channel. Be sure to join us then.